Hello, my name is Greg, and I help people drink less. But the techniques and the process and the tools that I use to help people make that change in their lives are really applicable to any sort of behavior change, whether that's changing procrastination, just being more productive, achieving goals, changing things around diet and eating, quantity of eating, junk food, and around exercise. Oh, and spending is another example. So what I'm going to do in this video, it's going to be a little more general purpose, or I'm going to speak to more of the general case with less focus specifically on drinking. It's going to be a little longer than some, but it really is going to give you really what you need to know about the first principle of behavior change, and really one of the most powerful things that you can learn. So I think it's worth your time. So what we're talking about here is actions. We want to change the action of drinking, the action of eating, the action of not doing the thing that we've said we would do, otherwise known as procrastinating. And of course, it's important and useful to be able to adjust our actions because our actions create our results. So anytime we want something new in our life, we want more money, we want to buy an object, we want to achieve a goal, we want to lose weight, we want to become stronger, we want to have a better quality relationship. To create those results, or the results that we create are dependent upon our actions. So understanding and being able to change our actions is pretty important. What I'm going to do in this video is give you some first principles way to start changing your actions and teach you a technique that can help you start to feel more in control of what you do. So the way I approach this is a little bit unconventional. It's probably different than what you've maybe done or thought about before, and that is that I put very little attention on the actions themselves. And the reason for that is that actions are just a symptom. They're a thing that is at the effect of other things. And it's a lot more effective to work upstream, to work on sort of the root causes. And so before I go there, what creates our actions then? What is the root cause? Well, I think a common, obvious answer would be to say it's our thoughts that create our actions. So you had the action of, now I'm not going to use that example. You may, after this video, go back to your office, let's say it's a work day, and write an email. And you're going to have a thought that says, okay, I decided to write an email. And maybe later today you're going to have a thought about going grocery shopping, or a thought about going to a restaurant, or making dinner, or something like that. So yeah, our thoughts direct our actions, right? But what about all those cases in our life where our actions are not in line with our thinking? Where we're either doing things that we don't want to be doing, like drinking too much, eating too much, or not doing things that we want to be doing, like exercising, for example, or getting our taxes done, or some other thing like that. What's in the way there? And I like to specifically talk about the example of exercise. The world is full of people with a lot of positive thoughts about exercise. They make resolutions to exercise. They want to exercise. They know that it would be good for them to exercise. They actually buy exercise equipment which sits in their house. They join gyms and pay for gym memberships. But the amount of exercising that's actually happening relative to sort of the mental investment in positive thinking about exercise, there's a lot less actual exercise happening. So that's a pretty good example of how our thoughts don't direct our actions. So what's going on? What is the problem? Well, what actually creates our actions, or in particular these undesired actions, are our feelings. So I want to talk about, or emotions. So I'm going to talk about three ways that our emotions interfere with our actions. So one is that we experience an emotional state, a feeling state, and we don't like it and we want it to change. And a lot of this is subconscious. Most of us aren't very aware of our emotional states. But that doesn't stop us from taking action to change them. But think of a more exaggerated or compelling emotional state, and think how uncomfortable it is, and then you can, just to sort of put this in context, for example, grief, the loss of a loved one or a pet, creates an intense feeling, and we want that to go away. We want that to change. But there's all sorts of more subtle emotions that we experience that we, again, subconsciously, we don't like how this feels, and we want to change it. So we seek to change that by distracting ourselves from it. And alcohol is a good candidate for that. Eating can be, scrolling on our phone, any number of things, and also some positive things can be distracting. Go for a run, for example. Also, we can try to resolve the emotion. So, for example, guilt is a social emotion, doesn't feel very good, and sometimes we can solve a guilt emotion by taking the action of apologizing. That's kind of the purpose of guilt. Another way that emotion blocks our action, or that emotion affects our action, is that it just blocks it. That it's really hard to get moving when you're in having certain emotional experiences. So apathy is one. Shame is an emotion that blocks action. It's hard to take action from a place of shame. Fear is another. And another way that emotion blocks our action is fear of future emotion. So, for example, regret is an uncomfortable emotion. And sometimes we can be indecisive, avoid taking the action of making a decision or taking action on a decision we've made because we're afraid that it's the wrong decision, and we're afraid that in the future we're going to regret it. And so it's the avoidance of that future regret, or the effort to avoid that future regret, creates an emotional experience right now, which basically often creates inaction. So what is this thing called emotion that is affecting our action so deeply, that's so powerful? So I'm going to give you just the most layman-oriented description of kind of the neuroscience or the biology that's associated or that describes what action is. Our brains are constantly scanning for threat. Are we under threat? Are we in danger? Are we safe and secure? And there's three kinds of threat I want to talk about. So the first is the most obvious, and that's is there a threat to our physical safety? Is there a snake in front of me I'm getting ready to step on? Is there an angry person running at me with a club? Am I being chased by a lion or by a vicious dog? So that's kind of the obvious one. Unfortunately, in our modern lives, we don't have much occasion to actually be too worried about our physical security. The second area of threat that we're always assessing is with respect to our material needs. And for most of the life of humanity, those were for shelter and food. And so we were kind of always scanning, am I going to have a good place, safe, warm place to sleep tonight, and am I going to get dinner? Again, in our modern lives, we don't have that problem. But what has happened is we've come to really equate money for these basic material needs. And we worry about money in the same way that our primitive ancestor probably worried about whether he was going to get dinner. And that's the source of some emotion, that's a type of threat that we're scanning for. And the third kind is perhaps the most important, and that is, what is our social security? What social threats are we experiencing? Because for most of our time as humans, being in the tribe, a well-accepted member of the tribe, was very important to our survival. If you were exiled from the tribe, that meant death. And to be low status in the tribe, to be maybe accepted but barely, meant that you had a lot less access to physical security and material security. So we're hardwired to care about and make these assessments about how are we doing with respect to our social security. And for example, the kind of things that our primitive brains are looking for is, are we showing ourselves to be competent? Because if you're not competent, then your tribe mates can't trust you to contribute, to have their back. Are we demonstrating integrity and honesty so that we can be counted on? And and often what's interesting is that the source of threat, especially in the social sense, is not anything that's happening in front of us right now. It's worry about something that we said yesterday or last month, or that somebody said to us, or worry about an interaction that's happening in the future. Am I going to be able to do that presentation properly, or am I going to demonstrate my incompetence? So there's these three types of threat. Our brains are always assessing to say, wow, am I secure or not in these three areas? And on the basis of that assessment, and this is a subconscious process, our physiology is being adjusted. Our brain is doing things to our body to make it ready for whatever the right action is. It's changing things about our blood flow and our heart rate and so on, our breathing, our digestive system. It's affecting our blood chemistry and our digestive chemistry and all sorts of things. And normally, of course, we don't explicitly feel any of this, but it all sets up what I call a vibration in our body, a kind of a nebulous thing, but you kind of can perceive if you pay attention to it. And actually, if you really pay attention, you can perceive specific sensations, and often these will be in the belly area or the chest, or tension in the neck and shoulders, maybe things in the face or the head. So what happens is because, or it's actually especially because we aren't really generally explicitly aware of these sensations, when we have one that's uncomfortable, we want it to go away, and this is how our behavior gets jerked around, how we're so responsive to these emotions, because we want to, when we feel uncomfortable, we want to make it go away. And so the key to managing our actions better is to basically have a good emotional awareness, to really see, not just in abstract terms or by understanding what I've said over the last 5 minutes, but experience in our body. Oh, I'm feeling a certain way. The vibration is X. I'm having some sensations Y. And it's my desire to change this emotional state that's causing me to get ready to do this dumb thing that I don't want to do anymore. Or it's this other particular vibration in my body and these sensations that has me not doing this thing that I want to do so desperately, but I keep not doing. So what I'm going to do now is lead you through an exercise that will help you start to get connected with your emotional experience, because this is the first thing. This is how you start to get authority over your emotions, and how they aren't like, you're not like a puppet at the end of the puppeteer's strings being jerked around in order to manage this physiology that's occurred because of your subconscious assessment of whether somebody's going to think you're competent or not. So this is called the Now Feeling exercise, and the goal of it is just to get you to pay attention to yourself without distraction, without resistance, without wanting the feelings you're experiencing, the sensations to change, and without trying to explain or understand them, without doing a bunch of intellectualizing, because that just takes us away from awareness. Just purely to feeling them. So I'm going to ask you some questions. There's no right or wrong answers. Some of them will seem dumb and you won't have an answer to the questions. To the question, that's okay. It's just a way to kind of keep you engaged. So without further ado, first question I've got is I want you to check in and see, before I do that, I want to point out that this exercise is more interesting and arguably more useful to learn about, to experience negative emotion. Because most of the unwanted stuff that we do or don't do is in relation to so-called negative or uncomfortable emotion. So if you're feeling good right now, do the exercise, but it may be not very dramatic. Or if you feel a little off, a little tense or something like that, well, I'm sorry, but that's good for this exercise. And if you're feeling good, but if you're willing and able to think of a situation recently where you didn't feel so great, where you experienced maybe some conflict with somebody or some anxiety or some embarrassment, if you're willing to kind of think about that situation and try to put yourself back in that space, well, do that. And if you need to pause the video for a second to do it, now's a good time to do that. All right, so you're in your emotional state, good, bad, indifferent. And the first question is, I want you to check in and notice, what is your level of arousal? That's the psychological term. Would you say that you're kind of feeling alert, kind of lean forward, engaged? And that could be in a kind of a positive way or a nervous way? Or would you say that you're more calm, kind of laid back, relaxed? Or if it's not a good feeling, it could be sort of a flat feeling, a low energy, flat feeling. All right, second question is, typically our feelings, our emotional states, or sensations from them can be put into one of two buckets. And so the first bucket, I sort of like to demonstrate, and to me it feels like this. My arms open, chest open, unprotected, feeling expansive, inviting. It implies a sense of sort of security and safety. So do you feel open and I think relaxed is a good word, but you could have this feeling of, quote, relaxed, meaning secure, but still be very engaged, very highly aroused. Or would you say that your general feeling, your general affect right now is more kind of tight, a little more contracted, a little more protective? All right. Now what we're going to try to do is to kind of go into the details of whatever that general character is that you've identified. And we're going to do a body scan. So I want you to start at your feet and just kind of feel your feet. There's probably not much emotional energy there, or at least I've never noticed much. But just to feel your body, feel your feet on the floor, maybe you feel your shoes or your socks around your feet. Just notice, oh, there is a little bit of sensation there. Bring your attention up through your legs and see if you feel anything. Maybe you feel your clothes against your legs or something like that. So keep moving your attention through your pelvis. Notice if there's any sensations there. And as you come up above your belt, this is where I and a lot of the people I work with notice most of their emotional energy or their emotional sensations, is pay attention to your belly area. Is there anything going on there? Do you feel any particular sensation? And if you do, just make a note of it. We're going to keep moving, but you might note, oh, I feel something in the center of my belly area. So continue with your attention up to your kind of your abdomen area where your solar plexus is. Do you notice anything there? Your chest, anything notable kind of going on with your heart, or is there a character to your heartbeat that you notice, or do you feel any kind of a sensation in your chest? Now check in with your shoulders and your neck or jaw. Maybe there's tension there is often how sensations will show up in those areas. And then finally, your head. Sometimes you can feel like there could be like a sensation behind your eyes, or maybe in your temples, or maybe you feel something in your scalp. All right, so hopefully you've identified at least one sensation. If you've identified more than one, just pick the one that seems most interesting, or maybe the one that's the most intense or the strongest. And I'm going to ask you some more questions to help you kind of dive into and increase your awareness of that. So, is this sensation that you've identified, is it constant and steady, or is it fluctuating in some way? And if it's fluctuating, what's the nature of its fluctuation? Is it waving, or is it kind of pulsing? You know, what's going on with the fluctuation? Would you say that the sensation feels fast, or does it feel slow? Just keep noticing, paying attention to that sensation. Would you say it's more of a feeling of fullness or of emptiness? Would you say it feels hard, like metal or stone maybe, or wood? Or does it feel soft like a blanket? Any other textural descriptions come to mind? Is it wet or dry, or jagged or smooth, or sandpapery, velvety, satiny? Is it dull or sharp or piercing? Does it have a color? Sometimes people, when they pay attention to a sensation like we're doing now, can associate a color with it. If you can't, no problem. All right, that's it basically. That's the process. That's how you engage with and kind of embrace an emotion. You found a sensation and you let it be there without trying to make it go away, and you just kind of checked it out. And maybe your reaction to this is, what? That's it? What's the big deal? Why you wasted the last 5 minutes of my life with those stupid questions? And that And to that I answer, exactly. That's my point, is that it's very subtle sensations for the most part that make us do a lot of the things we don't want to do. Like when we have an urge or a craving for a drink or for a sweet. It feels pretty intense, and then our brain steps in and says, oh, but it'll be okay, or I deserve it for I deserve a reward, I was good yesterday, or it won't matter. We get all this thought going on that rationalizes doing this thing, but really what's happening is we're trying to have the drink or have the cake to change these little subtle sensations of the urge in our body. And what you see is that they're not very strong. They're just not very intense. They aren't a big deal. And this is not to say that emotion is not a big deal. It is. And I wouldn't have accepted that a few years ago. I didn't think it was a big deal. Emotion's the most important thing in our life. I could talk about that. But the sensations that actually give emotions power, that drive our actions, typically aren't a big deal. They're a lot more subtle and a lot less hard to deal with than the sensation of having a bad cough or a fever, or of the kind of discomfort that you'll experience if you do any kind of hard exercise, for example. So obviously there's more to changing your behavior than just this, but it really is the first step, because what happens is you start to realize, oh, this is what's making me do the things I don't want, this change in my physiology that feels like X. Just that could be pretty powerful. It's like, oh, okay, I've been trying to make this anxiety go away, but all it is just sort of an icky feeling with a set of heart palpitations and shallow breathing, and actually when I check that out, it's not that bad. It won't kill me. I can be with it, and I'm not trying to minimize anxiety. I know for some people sometimes it can be very intense. It's kind of the first step in that space of letting an emotion sit there and be there. That's when you can then start to get some clarity and really investigate, well, where did this come from? Like, what is this emotion? Oh, is it guilt, or is it a fear of being incompetent? What kind of what is the underlying threat assessment that created this emotion, and how can I maybe get a new perspective on that? But that's all further work. I'm not going to go into that now. I'll have other videos that do that. So for now, I just want to say thank you for your attention, and come back to the YouTube here. I'll have more good stuff for you. All right, thanks, and have a great day.